Hello, everybody.
Hello.
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 Jo-Anne, I'll start with you. There are 4 separate videos that make up this composition. Each one is a different movement. The movement you lead has a story to it. There's a sense almost of being contained, of wanting to get out, banging on the wall in front of you. What were the themes or emotions you were conveying here that you'd felt when experiencing the Laura Toller exhibition?
It's more of an inspiration from her storytelling about home and the values that were ingrained in there, and her parents and their values, and being passed on to her, and how also land in terms of where she's from. And so when I saw that, I was inspired to think of something similar. So if you see her video, it was the 3rd video in hers, and she's standing in a forest surrounded by trees. And when I saw that, that was quite inspirational for mine. And so when I think about astrology, which is something that I study there, I think about the themes of elements. You have the earth, air, fire, and water. And so I think of the 4 elements and that influence. In terms of my community, when I think about the Black community, and so I am deaf, but I'm primarily Black. That's how I identify, and this is my everyday life. And my parents and their values and what they've instilled in me as a person, and what I carry on in my day-to-day, and those experiences, and how I want to express myself through the sign music. You could see this in the video, and I saw that in Laura's video as well. And basically that's what started the whole thing and how it became what it did.
Pamela, what did it bring out for you when you were watching what Laura had done? What did you find you wanted to express?
Well, with the different backgrounds with Laura's exhibition, there was one film that was Yiddish, and so there was music and some movement, but there was a focus on the hand movements. And the other one, there was a focus on someone making a sculpture and making 2 different faces. So I was inspired by that when I saw that. When you think about the future and the past and the washing of the hands and creating and making something with your hands. And then also her background with Romania and her grandmother. She had visited the space where her grandmother lived. And throughout the film, you saw pieces of her history with her clothing, the space that she lived in, and again, with the movements of the hand. So I feel that the stories, there's a little bit of humor, a little bit of expression of her experience as a Jewish person, and some of that negative experience as well. But then the idea of washing one's hands and washing off the blood off one's hands. And so when I think of the message, when I look back and you think about the future and what's to come, and you think about loss, and you think about things that are found again, and building things, and how things can be easily destroyed and taken down, and that destruction. There are so many things that are beautiful within things that are built, but then you see destruction through war and through history, and you see that cycle, and how land and bloodshed is part of that history, but you see it kind of cycle through that. But those stories inspired me to create what I did.
So both of those answers are totally fascinating interpretations of what Laura was doing. But you have to then take that and create music from it. The signed music is then the next level of that. Were you surprised at all by what music you ended up creating from that? Or did things take paths that you hadn't expected when it came time to be actually converting all those feelings into the music that came out?
With sign music, I've basically been practicing this art form since 2009. And so I had made that decision that, you have audible sound, which is what we're used to with music. And without that sound, you have what's called visual sound. And so we started exploring that concept. At first, it was just me, and I was creating pieces on my own. This is the first time that I have collaborated with other artists and worked together. And so that was a big thing for me. And that process was quite different, of course, than working in isolation. As a group, and with Ellen as well, working together, it allowed that space for creativity and also to have that interaction and building upon each other. We had a 6-month process of going through this from start to finish, and it evolved so much throughout that time. And I was fascinated with Jo-Anne and her background as a Black woman, and looking at looking at the history of Nigeria from her ancestors, and then also when we look at Theara and his background in Cambodia. And of course, I'm from European descent with Scotland and England, but also our connection with the deaf community. A lot of what we identify as deaf community is based on white culture, Catholicism, or Christianity. And so for me, I never had the space to really discuss or unpack all those histories and look at, a lot of the emphasis is always about being deaf. But there's so many layers. It's more than just being deaf. It's not just about sign language and being deaf in the community. And so going through the process and each of us going through that, it forced me to really unpack those layers and what that meant.
So, Ellen, that's a really interesting point that Pamela brought up there, the idea of shifting from it being a solo endeavor of sign music to being composed and performed by multiple artists. What did that mean for your project and what you wanted to see happen here?
So exciting to be part of a project where there's actually ground broken in a genre. Poof, what an amazing thing to get to be part of. The purpose of our project was really to look at processes of collaboration and co-creation. So we didn't put any kind of boundaries on what the musicians might make, and it didn't need to be finished in any way. So what has happened here is we have these beautifully polished, gorgeous works. And for me, when you have all three of the musicians signing their pieces together, it's a polyphonic texture. It's kind of like one of those Mozart operas where you have a bunch of different characters singing away their own stories, but you kind of get a gestalt of the whole thing. Here, we don't have any sound. We don't have any captions. Yeah. We just have this gorgeous visual musical language.
Now, I understand that not everyone thought the polyphonic thing was going to work originally. Is that true?
I had to talk a little bit, not to the musicians who drove the bus, right? Yeah. I think Pamela and Jo-Anne, you and Theara were really clear about how you wanted to film the pieces. But we were working with a deaf consultant, Jody Cripps, who is a sociolinguist. And for him, this was a very unusual move. And there's always the danger that information will be lost. But in hearing music, this is always also the case, right? I guess I'm come from a world where you have a lot of information, especially in experimental musical genres. And you find a different way through it each time. So I think having the videos that you can watch and rewatch is a great access to these pieces.
Jo-Anne, was that a concern, that idea of all these voices, all these pieces, the polyphonic nature of this that Ellen's talking about, all happening simultaneously? Were you concerned at all about information being lost along the way?
Not really, no. You know, we all had our own process, basically, you know, our space and our language and our own way of expressing to the world. And it's not often, well, I don't know if I should say that. It's rare to see, you know, a deaf musician actually exhibit the song. You know, like Pamela started in 2009, like she said, and she's a good friend of mine. She's an inspiration, and I always encouraged her artwork and what she was doing. This was the first time that actually I was involved as a performer. And signed music, this was a new experience for me as well, and I think for Theara as well. So for us, it was quite a different experience, and we looked up to Pamela for that guidance and, you know, having that space to make the decisions that we could throughout the whole process, and at the same time showing our stories and through signed music. And I think that it was such a good time. We really enjoyed ourselves. You know, and oftentimes you have hearing and deaf quite separated. And, you know, it's time to change that, to really shake things up and to really learn from each other and, you know, break, you know, that dependency on sound, that music isn't just about sound, to change that way of thinking, to look at visual noise and know that this is something that is really fascinating through your eyes. And it doesn't have to be something that you only hear. And it's not just for deaf people as well. Like, I mean, hearing folks, regardless, can still enjoy that, and we can share those stories with them. And Pamela just wants to add something. You know, when we talk about the polyphonic idea and with sound, I just want to emphasize that for sign music, it's not new. You know, we always, this is something that has been around for a long time, since deaf people have been on Earth. You know, we have our language that has developed, and, you know, we have the way, of course, there are things that are lost over time because, you know, back then we didn't have technology, so there's no way of documenting it. So right now, you know, of course, having that documentation is really important because it's something that we value. And we can also really analyze it. You know, I think a lot of people are still confused and they're not used to the idea or accept the idea. You know, in the 1960s, you know, we had sign language that as recognized as a real language. And even then people were like, a real language? No, that's just hand movements, you know. And it wasn't until, you know, the 1980s where deaf culture was actually labeled as a culture. And, you know, it started those dialogues and the research and documentation. And, you know, now with sign music, now this is another new concept for people, even though it's not really a new concept, but it's time. Like Jo-Anne said, it's time to have those discussions. You know, I've had these talks with Jody Cripps and, you know, looking at his research, and he's been researching this for a long time, and it was really foggy, you know, really at the beginning, what exactly was this? But to see these things happening and people talking about it, it's like the fog is clearing and people are finally able to identify what it is and to understand it a little bit better.
I love that idea of the fog starting to clear. Ellen, can we expect more collaborations coming out of the Carleton's art gallery and music department?
Yes. So my research center for music, sound, and society in Canada and the QAG are collaborating on a new project on listening. So it's in its fairly early stages. It's a big cross-Canada large-scale team. And what's important about that project is this resonance project has taught me so much about a multisensory, multimodal idea of listening. We don't listen with our ears. We listen with our hearts and our minds, our emotions, our ability to look each other in the eye. That's how we listen, right? So this project has taught me so much about that. I'm really grateful to these musicians.
I'm really grateful for all of you being able to be here today. Thank you so much for being this. I can't wait to see what happens next with the projects. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us from Pamela, and thank you from Jo-Anne.
Yes.